The defamation lawsuit brought against CM Punk and Colt Cabana by Dr. Chris Amon of WWE finally made it to court this past week, a little over a week before Punk has his next fight at UFC 225 next Saturday against Mike Jackson. Not the ideal time to be fighting a slander suit, but the wheels of justice move slowly, and it just so happened that this was the week for the trial to begin, since neither side apparently seemed very interested in settling out of court. So the nuts and bolts are this. Punk walked out on WWE, as many of you know, in January 2014. This was right after the Royal Rumble, the night after, in fact. He claimed he was sick. He had a staph infection that went undiagnosed by WWE medical staff, namely Dr. Amon. He did a tell-all podcast later that year with his then best friend Colt Cabana. Supposedly, I think there may have been some sort of falling out between the two of them later on. I'm not sure if they've since patched things up or not. They were seen talking and interacting and during breaks in the trial this week, so it's not like they're not on speaking terms. But on that podcast, Punk obviously had some very derogatory things to say about the good doctor, which Amon took exception to. He claimed that Punk's version of events was incorrect, and that as a result of that podcast, it had caused him great harm and great emotional distress from wrestling fans who would catcall him at WWE shows and who would tweet him nasty things on social media. Oh, if only I could sue for nasty things that people said about me on social media. I'd be quite the rich man. I think Punk is of the belief that WWE, and he said this before, he's of the belief that WWE is secretly bankrolling Amon's lawsuit, although that's never been proven to be true. This is, WWE is supposedly has nothing to do with any of this, and this suit was brought forth independently by Amon, independent of his employment with WWE. WWE is supposedly just a sideline watcher. They're watching from the sidelines. They have no vested interest in this, even though they obviously do. Most people figured that one or both sides would want to settle this well before it ever came to this point. That did not happen, and so here we are. Now, I want to just say hat tip to Nick Hausman and Ross Berman of WrestleZone.com for these notes. A lot of what I'm going to get into here is borrowed from their version of events. They were in the courthouse each day of the trial, not together, but between the two of them, they were able to share a lot of information, far more than what I'm sharing here with you. So if you want all the little details, all the little boring details that go on in court, they have all that covered on the website. But these are the more interesting parts. I figured I'd go day by day after 4 days of this trial here and let you know exactly what happened this week in the great lawsuit between Dr. Amon, CM Punk, and Colt Cabana. So day one of the trial kicked off on Tuesday. It was in Cook County, Illinois. Amon is seeking $1 million in compensatory damages and an unspecified amount in punitive damages. He testified on his own behalf on day one. He even read some of the tweets that he had received from people calling for him to be fired, and they were mocking him, Dr. Z-Pack and all this other stuff. The jurors also were able to listen to the entire Art of Wrestling episode where Cabana interviewed Punk. What must some of those jurors be thinking? The non-wrestling fans among them, which may well be all of them for all we know. We don't know if any of them are wrestling fans or not. I just look at this and I go, what must they be thinking with some of these stories that were probably told on that podcast, right? And Vince told me, make Roman look strong. It's like, I would have loved to have seen some of the expressions on their faces. Like, why is this not airing on the network? You could have pre and post show analysis with Clarence Mason and just like a court TV type deal. Just air this on the network, live coverage each day. I'd be glued to my monitor. Day two of the trial had Amon back on the stand in the morning. He actually showed one very abusive tweet from a CM Punk fan that called him a, quote, Z-Pack retard, end quote. One tweet came from a Twitter account with the name Mike Literis, which got a laugh from the people in the courtroom. Got a laugh out of me, too, because I guess I'm 5 years old. But, yes, poor Mike Literis was very abusive on Twitter towards Dr. Amon. This is just fantastic. I love this. So Amon explained to the jury how a Royal Rumble match works. He talked about what happened in the Rumble match in 2014, his interaction with Punk during the match, during which Punk suffered a concussion. The order was given once they realized Punk had some sort of head injury or that he might be concussed. The order was given for him to eliminate himself. Punk was having none of that. He did not want to interfere with whatever the creative plans were. He was supposed to be in the Final Four, which I think he may have been anyway. I mean, he was in there for a long time, probably 40, 45 minutes. It's not like he was dumped, prematurely the way that Daniel Bryan was in 2015, where he was in there for probably not even 10 minutes. But he did not, heed their requests. He was not interested in leaving the match early. So they ended up sending Kane down to the ring to get rid of him. And this was during that whole corporate Kane phase, if you'll recall, where he pretty much ruined everything every week on those shows by interfering in various matches. I mean, if you were in bed with your new wife, about to consummate the marriage, right before climax, Kane would interfere and ruin the moment. That was just sort of his thing back then. So then there was a texting exchange, a text message exchange that was shared in court between Punk and the doctor, where Punk says that he is sick, and he asks the doctor if he has a Z-Pack. And of course, naturally, Dr. Amen responds, "Yes, I've got them on me." I picture him wearing one of those ammo belts, like in Rambo, only it's Z-Packs instead of bullets. There was also another text exchange. This one was pretty damning, I think, between Amen and Chris Jericho, where they were talking, and he told Jericho that Punk's health was nothing like the way he described, which led Punk's lawyer in court to ask, why did Amen feel that it was okay to disregard HIPAA privacy laws in those text messages? So, which is actually a very good question. I'm not sure we got an answer to. Day 3 of the trial opened with the video testimony of Mark Carrano of WWE. He talked about the night of the Rumble, Punk getting hurt by Kofi Kingston. I guess when Kofi rolled into the ring, he immediately clotheslined Punk. If you watch that match back, Punk, I think, claimed that was where he suffered a concussion. He talked about the referees interacting with Punk and Punk being very aggravated, very agitated. He was irate after being eliminated by Kane from the match. There was no sign of any lump, he said, on Punk's back. Nor did Punk ever bring up his back with him in their conversations. Now remember, Punk claimed that he had this really nasty purplish lump on his lower back. And I think even at one point in court when he was testifying, he sort of acknowledged his own mistake and that he sometimes describes it as being on his back when really it was on his butt. But, it was sort of right around where his waistband would be, right, of his tights. So it's possible that nobody would have seen it unless this guy pulled down his trunks. So just because Carrano didn't see it doesn't mean that it wasn't there. It also doesn't mean that it was there, right? We don't know for sure. I'll say this, though. This would make for a very boring episode of Law and Order for all this arguing back and forth about whether or not there was a lump on this guy's back. The jury also saw video testimony from future Knox County, Tennessee Mayor Kane. He was asked at one point, "You eliminated CM Punk from the 2014 Royal Rumble, correct?" To which he replied, "Illegally, yes." And Punk giggled in court at that answer. Again, I reiterate, why is this not on the network? So Colt Cabana later on, he took the stand to testify. He was asked far too many boring questions about the analytics of his podcast and how many people listened to it, and there was a dispute about the number of people who listened to it that he claimed. I almost fell asleep reading this. But then there was a funny moment where Dr. Amen's attorney suddenly stopped his line of questioning and realized that he had been reading from the wrong deposition. And so he began all over again. And Cabana, at that point, I guess, must have also questioned him about something, because then Cabana got yelled at by the judge for doing so. I'm reading this and I just think of that dog in the burning house meme, like, this is going well. Everything is fine. Day 4 had Cabana back on the stand. In the middle of his testimony, an entire class of 8th graders apparently entered the courtroom. I don't know if they stormed the courtroom with Nerf guns or what. All the notes said here is that they entered the room, so I assume unarmed. Cabana claims that he saw Punk shirtless at his house, wearing the, quote, camo shorts that he always wears, because who among us does not have a casual pair of camo shorts that we wear around the house? I'm staring at mine right now, actually. All of a sudden, the defense suddenly produces said pair of camo shorts from underneath the desk, and they enter it as exhibit, I think it was, I wrote exhibit 117. I don't know what the first 116 exhibits were, but this was exhibit 117, which Colt Cabana on the stand under oath identifies, in fact, as the camo shorts that were worn by CM Punk. Then comes my favorite exchange of the trial so far. The lawyers get into an argument over how much footage can be shown in court from the 2014 Royal Rumble. Eamon's lawyers do not want footage of Kane chokeslamming Punk through the announce table to be shown to the jury. And to be fair, no one should be shown footage of the 2014 Royal Rumble. I wish I hadn't seen footage of the 2014 Royal Rumble, so I would not want to subject the jury to it either. So the judge then turns around and she says she doesn't know who Kane is. She's like, I don't know who Kane is. One of the lawyers tells her he's the big man without a shirt, which really narrows it down in a Royal Rumble match, no less. She then calls the lawyers into the hallway where shouting is heard. I just am reading this and I'm thinking, this is amazing. I take back what I said before. This would make for a great Law and Order episode. Punk finally takes the stand. He gets very emotional. He says, hearing about who I was back then, I guess he was in a bad place, and hearing how I behaved and who I was back then just brings up memories of things I don't care about anymore. I assume by that he means pro wrestling, which is sad. I mean, it's sad. Not that I'm excusing, I'm saying Punk is an innocent angel here and all that, but just, you can tell, here's a guy who was wrestling his entire life. He had a passion for it. And just to see how that passion was just beaten out of him is a really sad thing. He also confirmed, I guess this was a bit of news this week, he confirmed that the CM in CM Punk does in fact stand for Chick Magnet, which is not a big secret. He was part of a tag team early in his career on the indies called the Chick Magnets. It was CM Punk and CM Venom. But over the years, he's kind of joked around. He's had some fun with it when people ask him the question. And so he's claimed at different points that it stood for Chicago Made. Sometimes he says it stands for Cookie Monster. He did a Q&A a few years back for the UFC. This is before his first fight, but after he had signed with UFC. And he did this online Q&A where he claimed that the CM stood for Chuck Mosley, who was part of the group Faith No More. He claimed that his friends used to call him Chuck Mosley, and he just took it and shortened it to CM. And this was reported at the time as news. This was taken seriously and reported as news at that time. So now, under oath, we finally get the truth that CM stands for Chick Magnet. Punk started crying at one point, and the judge called for a 15-minute recess to allow him to compose himself. This whole thing just reads like, if you really read the back and forth with the lawyers on both sides, like one day it seems like Eamon has the stronger case, the next day it sounds like Punk and Cabana have this in the bag. The whole thing reads like a gigantic waste of time. A lot of the text messages do seem to support Punk's version of events with regard to the lump. But it's also obvious, not that Punk is lying, but it's obvious that his recollection of certain events was not entirely accurate. And he even admits that. He says, look, I could be off, like some things maybe were exaggerated, but the crux of what I'm telling you here is true. But some details may not be. Now, Eamon is suing for over $1 million for emotional distress. But it has not, he admitted, it has not affected his standing in WWE at all. He never lost his job. He was never sent home. It's not like he's subjected to some kind of, internal abuse within the company every day he goes to work or anything like that. It hasn't affected his pay at all, his income. So it's hard to see him swaying enough jurors to punish Punk and Cabana. And Cabana really got screwed here because he didn't do anything wrong. You could say, well, he gave Punk the platform to spew all these lies, which may not be lies. But he gave him the platform to sort of defame this man. But, I could tell you as a podcaster that if I were in that situation, I mean, it would be a horrible thing to go through, because I have a lot of sympathy for Cabana. He sort of got roped into this whole thing, I think, out of spite, more than anything else. I think of all the people involved here, he's the one who's really getting screwed, because he doesn't have the kind of money that CM Punk has, and he certainly doesn't have, I'm sure the money that either Eamon has, or if WWE is maybe secretly supporting him, Cabana doesn't have anything like that. I'm sure he does well for himself, but he's not, Richie Rich over there. And so he's had to pay for all these legal expenses and everything. He can't recoup that. I mean, unless the jury comes back. I don't know if that's even possible, if the jury could sort of, rule against Eamon and say, not only are we ruling against you, but you have to pay this man's legal fees. I don't even know if that's a possibility here, but that's probably not going to happen. So he's the one who I really feel the most for. The judge told the jurors that closing arguments in the case should take place on Tuesday, so that's when things should wrap up. At that point, we'll see how long it takes the jury to reach a verdict. My guess is Eamon loses and everybody goes home, but Punk and Cabana are the ones who are out tens of thousands of dollars, and frankly maybe more, in legal fees, which in the end is probably what WWE wanted.